Welcome to today's Ethnic Studies webinar series on Chicano Latino Studies. My name again is Cindy Quiralte, and Policy Advisor to State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. I am very honored today to be here with all of you to discuss Chicano Latino Studies. As a former Chicano Latino Studies graduate myself, I can tell you that the power of learning your history, the transformative experiences that it can bring to so many students is incredible. And we want to thank you for your time tuning in today. So today we have some very special guests with us. We have the iconic Dolores Huerta, we have Assemblymember Jose Medina, and we have students from across the state of California that will share today their stories of learning Chicano studies, learning about their family's experiences, their history, their community, and discussing some of the relevant issues that they're experiencing today as students in California. And so I want to say welcome and thank you. I know that we're going to have a lot of questions and opportunities to hear from student voices and learn a bit more from Dolores Huerta, as well as Assemblymember Jose Medina on the power of Chicano Latino studies and ethnic studies as a whole. So thank you. I'm going to transition over now to Olivia Sanchez, who is a student on the California Youth Advisory Council. Olivia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Sanchez, and I am a representative of the Chicano Latino Youth Leadership Project, and I have the honor and privilege today of introducing Assemblymember Jose Medina. Assemblymember Medina was elected in November of 2012 to represent California's 61st Assembly District, where he currently serves as the chair of the Assembly Committee on Higher Education. A former educator, Mr. Medina cares deeply about education and works to champion policies that improve the lives of students across the state. He believes that an educated workforce is critical to the success of California. Mr. Medina's eagerness to assist students beyond the classroom motivated him to pursue public office. Assemblymember Medina introduced AB 331 to mandate ethnic studies as a graduation requirement in all California high schools. When introducing the bill, he stated, "At a time when the national climate drives divisiveness and fear of otherness, ethnic studies can play a critical role in increasing awareness and understanding." Mr. Medina recognizes the critical role higher education plays in supporting jobs and opening up doors for opportunity. It has been my pleasure to introduce Assemblymember Jose Medina.
Thank you, Olivia. Assemblymember Jose Medina.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Olivia. Also want to thank our State Superintendent, Tony Thurmond, for putting these webinars together. As Olivia said, I had the opportunity of teaching ethnic studies and Chicano studies as a teacher here in Riverside, at Riverside Poly High School. And I don't think I could have said it any better than Cindy did on the power of ethnic studies and Chicano studies in transforming students' lives when they see themselves reflected in the curriculum and they see how their family's history is part of the larger history of the state of California and of the United States. So that is exactly why I introduced AB 331, which we hope to get to the governor this legislative session. And I would ask all the students out there to get on board and to become active and to write letters to the governor, write letters to the chair of appropriations, Anthony Portantino, to make sure that we get AB 331 passed out of the Senate and get the governor's signature so that all students in high school can benefit from ethnic studies classes and Chicano studies. With that, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce a good friend and someone who doesn't need an introduction. And if you have not yet gone out and watched the movie Dolores, you need to go and see it, rent it, get it on Netflix, but watch the movie Dolores. It was an honor to be part and to get a chance to vote for Dolores Huerta Day in the state legislature. And now for the last 2 years, we celebrate Dolores Huerta Day. So it is again my honor to introduce the co-founder of the United Farm Workers, Dolores Huerta.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction. Assemblyman Medina, and we definitely have to get your bill passed. It's an absolute must. This is so important because we know that one of the reasons that we have so many problems in our country, in the United States, is just simply because we have so much racism. And we do know that a lot of the racism comes from ignorance, because really people don't know what the contributions have been of people of color to our country, starting with African Americans, the slaves and Native Americans who really built the foundation of our country. And then all of the immigrant groups that came, from Mexico, from Japan, from China, from the Philippines, from India. These are all the people of color that built our country. Unfortunately, that is not being taught today in our schools. And because it's not being taught, then we have a lot of people that somehow think that the founders who formed our government also formed our country, which are two different things. One thing is the government, but the other thing is our country. And our country, as we know, was brown when the Pilgrims arrived here. So we really have to teach that, and we have to start teaching that not only in high school. And after your bill gets passed, Assemblyman Medina, maybe we can have another one so we can start teaching ethnic studies actually in pre-K and pre-kindergarten. And that way we will erase that whole issue of white privilege and white supremacy that all of us have been fought for so many years. And knowing the history of who we are is so important. I have to say that, of course, when I was going to school many years ago, didn't even dream of having anything like ethnic studies. And I'm like a fourth generation citizen of the United States. My great-great-grandparents on my mother's side were born in the United States of America. But as a Mexican American, when I was in high school especially, I felt so much discrimination that I was actually getting really depressed. And it was only because my mother and I went to Mexico for the first time. And I saw all of the Mexican people and the pride that they had going to the pyramids and seeing Mexican doctors and lawyers and the pilot of the plane that we flew in. And then I started learning more about our culture, about our great artists like Diego Rivera, Jose Orozco, Rodolfo Tamayo. So I had to learn that to get my pride back for being a Chicana. And then, of course, in the 60s, we had the whole Chicano movement, and then the farm worker movement, which I was a great part of. And by the way, today, I am no longer with the farm workers. I have my own organization called the Dolores Huerta Foundation for Grassroots Community Organizing. And so I am so grateful to you, Assemblyman Medina, and I am so grateful to our Superintendent of Education, Mr. Thurman, for making this possible and for bringing us all together because, and I want to thank any of you that were out there protesting. And if you were, I hope you were doing it safely, because I know that all of those young people that were protesting out there and are, fighting racism and fighting discrimination. And this is something we have to get rid of. And we see it happening now. So I want to say to all the students that are with us today on this webinar, your time has come. This is your moment, because you are the ones that are going to lead us into this next, this next life that we're going to have, where we can really fight and get rid of some of these terrible things that have really hurt so many young people that have been crushed by racism so that they think that they cannot go forward. But, we know that Chicano studies, ethnic studies is going to help all of us. So I am very grateful to all of you for doing this.
Thank you, Dolores, for that history and overview. And like Assemblymember Medina said, you need no introduction. You have inspired a wave of generations of feminists, of women across the country. And I just want to thank you for your leadership. Being from Fresno myself, I can tell you, Central Valley, you are our treasure. So thank you for all of the work you've done in planting seeds for the next generations. We applaud you for that, and really are thankful for your time today. To hear some more of your experiences and your wisdom that you've learned over the years that you'd like to impart on everyone watching on Facebook Live, as well as on Twitter and through Zoom. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our students to ask Dolores a few questions, so that way we can learn a little bit more. So I believe the first person that we have, the first question is Hema. Hema, if you could read question number 1.
Yes, hello, my name is Hema, pronouns she, her. I'm a rising sophomore at Stanford University. And my question is, what has been your experience with Chicano Latino studies? And what do you find is the importance of Chicano Latino studies and ethnic studies in your life and for all young people?
Well, as I said before, I never had the opportunity to have Chicano studies. I had to kind of learn it on my own about even my own family's history. But, you know, in learning, and I'd love to talk about this, there are so many things that people have to know. For instance, I love to tell people when I'm speaking to audiences, have you ever Googled the map of the United States before 1847? Why was that important, that date? That is when the United States of America took all of this land from Mexico. And when you look at that map, and if you haven't done it, I would suggest that you do it, you're going to really be taken aback, because when you look at the map before 1847, a third, 1/3 of the United States was Mexico. And when you look at that and you think, wow. And so when they tell us, go back where you came from, we have to say, hey, we are where we came from. And then even carrying that thought even further along, when we think of the Americas, what is the Americas? It's North America and it's South America. And so here we can say that we are the indigenous people of the continent. So they cannot tell us, go back where you came from. We are exactly where we're supposed to be. And unfortunately, when they did take a lot of that land from Mexico, like Texas, and of course it was Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, parts of Utah and Nevada. And you say, well, hey, this was a lot of land that they took from Mexico. And then all of the discrimination that happened after that. And this is a statistic that I just heard the other day. It really shocked me. Now, you know, we've heard a lot about lynchings, right? And about lynchings of Black people in the South. But do you know that in Texas, when they took that land from Mexico, there were 7,000 lynchings, 7,000 lynchings of Mexicans. And, you know, of course, we know the same thing happened to the Native Americans too, because we almost had a complete genocide of the Native Americans that were killed when they took over that land from Texas. That's why when you look at Texas and compare Texas with New Mexico and Arizona, and you don't see a lot of Native American reservations in Texas like you do in Arizona and New Mexico, because there was a genocide. Native Americans, to escape that genocide, they had to go south of the border to Mexico, or they had to go to Canada. So these are things that we are still learning. But when we have that knowledge and we can share that knowledge, the other thing that I like to also share is this. And this is because we know in our Latino community, we have to admit it, that we also have racism in our Latino community. And where does that come from? Well, it comes from the same source. It comes from slavery. It comes from domination. It comes from having people work for nothing, like the slaves had to work for nothing. And the Indians, when they were conquered by the Spaniards, they had to work for nothing. You know, to build, you might say, Latin America and parts of the United States of America. And so when we see that happens, is that this idea of slavery, this idea of domination, it still affects us today. And so when Cesar Chavez and I started the farm worker movement, we had the same situation. You had all these farm workers whom they really didn't pay very much money. Not only did they not pay them, but to make them more humiliated, they would have them work out there without having a toilet in the field, without having drinking water in the field, without having rest periods, and working for miserable wages. So we have that same history of domination that we as Latinos also inherit. And we really have to share that with people, because the colonization, that mentality of domination, unfortunately, it still lives in many of us. And I'm gonna throw this out there, and I know a lot of you will relate to this. So when a baby is born, often our families, the Latino families, say, ay, qué bonito el niño o la niña, es bien güerito. You know, the baby is beautiful because it's light complected. And so we as Latinos have to learn how we can celebrate the indigenous side, our indigenous side, our native side, our darker side. and not always just think that someone is better looking, better prepared, or somehow superior because they have a lighter skin. And I know when I'm saying this to you, some of you are thinking about your own families, okay, where this kind of a racial dynamic is still in play.
Dolores, I think a lot of us can relate to that. So thank you for going there and calling it out. And so we appreciate your honesty and your courage and your tenacity. I'm going to ask for our next student, Stephanie, to ask question number 2, please. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for being here. My question is, how would you discuss your advocacy to get Chicano studies and ethnic studies implemented in states like California, Arizona, and in other places?
Well, they have shown that ethnic studies, for instance, in Arizona, where they actually did have ethnic studies in the school district in Tucson, they had ethnic studies in the community college there. But then, of course, they took it out. But what they found is that the students that actually had ethnic studies, that they had much better grades. They had much more initiative in learning. They were a lot more competent. And as many of you may know, that they actually took ethnic studies out, and then there was a big fight. They did a lawsuit and they had to put it back in. So you might say that Arizona was ahead of us in some ways, but I think now that California, we're going to be able to catch up, and we know it's going to make all the difference in the world because it's going to give a sense of pride to our Latino students. And not only Latino students, because we also have our Asian students, and we have our Black students, and they will also benefit from having ethnic studies. So it's not just about Latinos, it's about all of us people of color who have been discriminated.
Thank you, Dolores. I'm going to ask for Olivia to ask the next question, please, Olivia.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for your time. And I'd love to ask you, what can you share about your experiences organizing the UFW and farm worker movement? And what parallels do you see to today's organizing efforts to bring social justice? And what advice would you give to provide student activists?
Well, I think organizing is really the basis of everything that we do. And I just want to ask all of you, please, when you go out there trying to make change, be sure and organize people to join with you and to do that, to help you, because sometimes it's very hard to do anything by ourselves. I always like to say that even Jesus had to have the disciples help him, okay? And he could do miracles. So think about ourselves, the miracles that we're trying to accomplish by changing society. And basically the way that Cesar Chavez and I organize, and the way I am still organizing with my foundation, is we do it through what we call house meetings. And this is just getting a few people together. We talk about the issues, we talk about the problems, but then we talk about how we can solve the problems. And the main thing is that we have to convince people, as we did the farm workers, that they had the power to make the changes, that they didn't have to wait for somebody to come outside, of their area or outside of their community to make this happen, but they actually could do it themselves. And I think this is very, very critical, because often because our people, they lack competence, or they don't have sometimes a formal education, and they think that somehow they don't have the authority, you might say, to be able to make changes. But we have to say to them, you know what, you do have the authority, you do have the power. And in bringing people together, this is the way that we make the changes. And with my foundation, we have been able to get some of our, we call them vecinos, because we call them united neighbors when they come together. And they have brought in, actually into the community, street lights, swimming pools, sidewalks, and a brand new gymnasium for their middle school, and little neighborhood parks. And they have been able to make all of these changes and even get themselves elected to school boards and city councils and recreation boards and water boards. So these are the kind of changes that we need to make to empower everybody that we know we can make the changes. And then we have to get good people elected, like Assemblyman Jose Medina. because ultimately they're the ones that are going to make the laws. So voter registration, voter education is extremely, extremely important, because we have literally millions of Latinos who could vote, but they're not registered to vote. And we have another few million that are registered, but then they don't vote. So I think these are the most crucial things, okay? To know that we have the power to make the changes, but to know that we have to put the changes into laws. And the only way that we can do that is by electing good people to the legislature and to the Congress, so that they can create the laws that we need. And when we have a law, we can hold people accountable. That's kind of like the shortened version of organizing.
Thank you, Dolores, for going through that with us and sharing, I think, the shortened version. I felt like I was in a house meeting with you. I know that you have such a tremendous history and a wealth of experience building relationships and just setting that foundation for so many other students and communities to thrive. So thank you for continuing to do this great work. We have a number of students with us on the call today, and so I just really want to make sure that we give them an opportunity to ask questions from you and explain a little bit about their stories with Chicano Latino Studies and any questions they may have. So I'm going to turn it over to our students to share out.
Hello, Dolores. My name is Sara, and I'm from San Diego, California. I'm also a student, and I would just like to start off by saying thank you for always sending your message and speaking so clearly and passionately. It makes you want to enlighten yourself when you see other generations and other movements just be so inspiring, again, like I said. And my question is, well, I'd like to also give some background. I'm a student and I never had ethnic studies. I had MECHA at my school, was so wonderful, but never joined for some reason. And finally, this quarantine months that we've been inside, I joined Escuelita Aslan in Los Angeles. And it was the first time that I was able to learn about our history and young student movements, and it was through these teachers in South Central LA, and they showed us, films and news articles and books, and it's just like this hidden thing that shouldn't be hidden from us that I discovered, and it made me, want to change everything. It's kind of like the way you can be oppressed is like divide and conquer, right? And so when you are divided from your history and from your ancestors, you do feel conquered in that way. You feel like the message is your history is not taught, so you don't matter. And so I am so looking forward to the next classes in high school that are going to be able to learn a little bit earlier than me, which the earlier the better. And my question is, right now, while we wait for school to resume and for ethnic studies to be a requirement, how can we unteach and unlearn ourselves the one-sided history and kind of the false history that we've learned for so many years?
Well, I think that you have pretty much put it out there right now when you were speaking, but I think we have to look for those documentaries. Some of them are on public television or from other sources. And maybe someone Medina can help us also with this and referring us to some websites that we can go to find. And I know right now, because of what's happening with all of the demonstrations and everything, that I know across my computer, there's a lot of different webinars that are being held to kind of look for that history, but then we can do it on our own, kind of reading, like from New Mexico, we have Rodolfo Anaya, who wrote about the Latinos in New Mexico. We have some of these other great Mexican authors also, like Carlos Fuentes. Maybe right now I'm having to remember some of them that I'm thinking about that write about Mexico, these really great Latino writers and some Central American writers also. And some, I remember seeing this once at a seminar that I went to, and a lot of us don't know this, but Mexico City was the largest city in the world, and it still may be, Mexico City. And in the time of the Aztecs, they had these huge irrigation systems that are actually, they say, better than the ones they have today. And this was happening when the people in Europe were still living in caves. We had these high developed civilizations. And of course, in Peru, the Incas, and even in Central America, they have found all of these great pyramids that people had actually built. And it's astounding. I remember once seeing this one thing on television said, well, they think that there had to be aliens that came from some other planet that built these incredible pyramids. I think, wow, did they think that the people didn't have the ability to build their own pyramids? But it again shows how history has been thwarted and changed again to demean the indigenous peoples that had all of this great knowledge that we know that was crushed by the conquistadores, by the Spaniards and the people and the Portuguese and all of these other nations that conquered people. And the same thing we have to say this about Africa. I love to tell people this, is that number one, human civilization began in Africa. The first humans, Homo sapiens, that's us, Homo sapiens, began in Africa. And so if we go back and we trace our origins as human beings, Homo sapiens, it came back to Africa. And I like to say that to people because we are all Africans of different shades and colors. And I like to add to that, hey, all of you in the KKK, all the White Citizens Council people, all you neo-Nazis, Proud Boys, all of these white supremacist groups, get over it. You're Africans, okay? Just get over it. And you know what? If you do your DNA like I did, guess what you find out? I have 0.003 Africanness in my DNA, as we all do. And so I think that's the main thing that we have to, push and say that todos somos humanos. We are all one people. And one thing that we have found in this pandemic is that we have to protect each other. We have to take care of each other. And that's the only way that we have survived as a human race on this planet. And so we have to continue to do this, and we have to spread those indigenous values of cooperation, of protection, of respect for each other. And that's the way that we can make it happen. I'm not sure, I kind of strayed a little away from your question, but I think the main thing is to look for those sources of information that we can find out about our people. And thank you, because I think your statement was so beautiful, because what you said is exactly what happens. When we know who we are, then it makes us feel valued and respected. Gracias.
Exactly. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you, Sara. So next up, we have a student. We have Joseph, who's next. Joseph, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Hello, my name is Joseph Moreno. Sorry for no picture quality. My laptop is super old. But anyways, growing up, I've grown up in Southeast LA, in the city of Bell, and learning my history just throughout my lifespan. It's always been as if people of color, African Americans, Native Americans, even Mexicans, we've always been viewed and portrayed as almost these savages, as almost these people that needed Europe to come over here to show us the way, show us how to properly, live our life. And for the longest time, I just went with that. I just went that, people back then, the people, our ancestors, maybe they were just savages, right? That maybe, that because of Europe, maybe that's because of Europe, I'm able to live the life of now. But the more I see it, the more I've learned. I'm so grateful for the history teachers and the teachers in general I've had growing up, because they've thrown out these books that are just filled with European history, and they've actually taught us the history that as it was written, as if it was gone through. And I'm glad because of that, because now as I've grown up, especially in middle school, I'm able to see my ancestors as not savages, but actual people that were conquered. And the funny thing is, my mom actually, she's a teacher herself, and she taught me that whenever in history books you hear the word massacre, it was when people in the United States or when Europeans lost to people, to Native Americans, to Africans, or to the Mexicans themselves. And I didn't realize it. I always thought of it as, oh my God, these people were savages. But I never realized how true she was to that until I actually reflected. And that's what Chicano Studies has done for me. It's actually showed me my history, and I could be proud to say that my family was from Mexico, that we owed 1/3 of the United States. It makes me feel proud inside that that half of me, the Mexican half of me, has such a big impact on the world. Because I don't know if people know this, the Aztec calendar is only seconds off. And like you were saying, Ms. Dolores Huertas, the Aztecs, the Mayans, they were all in caves, living in caves, totally disconnected from the rest of the world, where Asia, Europe, they all thought they were at their peak, and yet they were 30 years off from the calendars today. And they were able to build these massive pyramids with just their bare hands. And that's what's amazing. That's what amazes. It makes me proud to say that I can be Mexican American. So, and my question to you is, how would you push back on people who push back on these studies? Because there's always going to be people that say, oh no, you're enforcing it. What would you say to those people?
Well, I think this is what we're up against right now. And this is what I want to say to all of you, that you are it right now. You are arriving on this scene in a very timely manner, because we are in a moment of complete chaos that's happening in our country right now. And so many young people like yourselves, you're fighting for our history, for our real history, and you're fighting for yourselves. And we have to try to erase the ignorance of all of these poor people that got the Euro history, and so somehow we have to try to educate them. And I'm glad, I think our school system and what the Assemblyman Medina is doing is the right thing, because we have to use our educational system as one way to be able to do this. And the rest of them that are not going to be able to get and I'm talking about, and by the way, I'm glad that this is going to be mandatory, because all those white kids all those Caucasian kids, they have to learn this history also, not just us for our own dignity and pride, but they have to learn it also so that we can erase that whole idea of white privilege and white supremacy. So it's important for them to learn it also. In the meantime, when we talk to people that do not know this history, then we should try to tell them about it. If they're Latinos or other people of color, we should share the history with them, and also learn the history of other ethnic groups like the Filipinos, for instance. A lot of people don't know, but the Philippines actually had won the independence in the Philippines before Teddy Roosevelt sent the Rough Riders in there, and they killed 1 million Filipinos. They had already beat the Spaniards. They already were ready for independence, but then they went there and they murdered them. And so many of the other ethnic groups have had similar histories as we have had as Latinos. So, but we just have to have patience with people that are racist, talk to them, and it's hard, and the other thing, don't hate them, okay? It's really, really important that we have to understand that their families were racist, and this is where they got their information from. And so they don't really know any different, because we know that when children are born, children are not racist. So it is only the kind of cultures that they are raised in. And every opportunity that we have, we can talk to other people and tell them, did you know this that we were just talking about? Did you know about the calendars? Did you know about these great civilizations? And they probably don't know, because nobody ever taught them that. And so we don't want to become part of the haters, okay? We want to bring peace, and we want to bring love, and we want to bring knowledge to people. So if we can share it, and I have a saying that some of you may have heard before, but I say every moment is an organizing moment. So like maybe when you're traveling with somebody, share the information so that, you know, kind of pique their interest. So each one of us have got to become, I call it like missionaries of justice. So we can share the knowledge that we have with other people, and then they in turn can share it with others. And this is the way that little by little we can start transforming people. And right now, and the other great thing about all of you that you have that we didn't have, Cesar Chavez and I didn't have when we were organizing farm workers, is guess what? You got your cell phones. You got your cell phones, you've got your devices. And we know that information can be secured instantly, and knowledge can be secured instantly. And I guess the only thing that we have to caution people is to not listen to false news or fake news, but also go back to the sources of information to find the truth.
Thank you, Dolores. So we have quite a few students here that are interested in asking questions. And so just want to definitely give a quick shout out to the Chicano Latino Youth Leadership Project and to the Puente Project for stepping up and helping us organize the students today. So thank you. I know that I have a list here of students that want to ask questions. So I have Viva, Nathan, Stephanie, Olivia, and Gemma. So Viva, you're up next.
Hi, my name is Vida Mendoza. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm Salvadorian and Mexican, and I've often found that Central American studies are often left out, even in ethnic studies. So my question to Ms. Dolores Huerta is, how should California Department of Education legislators include Central American studies because of the fact that we often feel left out in Chicano and Latino studies?
Well, I think that's very important. And of course, I think there's a really good book, again, by Carlos Fuentes about Simon Bolivar and how he was able to organize, of course, South America, not so much Central America. But I think we kind of share the same history. Mexico, Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. But I want to talk a little bit about the economics, and I'm glad you mentioned El Salvador. And one of the things I also like to remind people, when we think of all of the refugees that have come on the border and people that are in cages, and we think, why are people coming? You know, why are they having to leave their native lands, which is so beautiful that people go to as tourists? And we think, well, people are economic refugees because they cannot make a living in those Central American countries. And then the question that we ask is why? Why can't they make a living? And we think of the United States of America that our government here is responsible for a lot of the inequities that exist in Central America. And I just like to use the word bananas. How many bananas do we eat? And then somebody else said coffee. Okay, bananas. Okay, with all of the bananas that we eat, the people in Guatemala, people in Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, people should be really, really wealthy. The problem is that the money that we spend on bananas and on the money we spend on coffee, it does not go to the people on whose land these products are produced. It goes to the American companies, American corporations. And so therefore the people are still destitute, it's still poor because they never get the money of the crops that are grown on their own land, and that they're the ones that do the work to produce them. And this is wrong. And this is why we have to elect good people, like our governor, Gavin Newsom, the senators that we have, Assemblyman Jose Medina, Shirley Weber, our great Assemblywoman from San Diego, so that we can change all of this. And hopefully when we get a better government than what we have right now, we can start saying, okay, instead of exploiting, and we continue the exploitation, just like the conquistadores did of the indigenous people. Now it's an economic exploitation that we do of all of these governments. And there's a book that I would like to refer people to. It's called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This book was written by a gentleman who is now an environmentalist. And he explains how he worked for a corporation and how they would go into governments. And if those governments did not turn over their economic resources to these American corporations, that they would actually kill them, kill the leaders. And there's some other really good videos out there. One of them is When the Mountains Tremble, which is about Rigoberta Menchú from Guatemala. And then there's another great video by Oscar Torres about Los Inocentes. And this is about how the young people in El Salvador, about the wars that were going on in El Salvador and how many people were killed. It's called Innocent Voices, Innocent Voices. And I think the fellow's name is Oscar Torres. So I would recommend some of those movies also, so that we can see the wars in Central America and El Salvador, Honduras. They were created by the United States, and the people there are still suffering from those wars. They never recovered from those wars. So we have to really think about the foreign policies that we have in our United States of America that create a lot of despair in the Central American countries. I don't know if that answered your question, but you know, when I think about our Central American countries, and in the movie, by the way, Dolores, you will see where I am getting beaten up by the police in San Francisco. And I was at a picket line, and a lot of the people in that picket line they had big signs that said U.S. out of El Salvador. And this is when the wars, where we were creating the civil wars in Central America under the presidency of George Walker Bush.
Thank you, Dolores. So
Thank you.
thank you, Vida, for your question. I have Nathan up, and so we have about 5 students that have more questions. So Nathan, Stephanie, Olivia. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, well, first off, thank you, Dolores Huerta, for doing this for us. I have like my grandparents and my dad would like tell stories about like how the UFW would like go to the camps and stuff like that. So my name is Nathan. I'm from Salinas, California, which is one of the majority Latino cities in California. And regarding you saying that we should be voting for politicians that will support us, like you said, and the ethics studies laws that you wanted to pass, I wanted to bring up one of Joe Biden's claims that the Latino vote will not impact him as much in this upcoming election. And that sort of got me thinking about how much the Latino vote actually mattered and what happened to it in previous elections where Obama was sort of reaching for that vote. So I wanted to ask, how can the advancement of education via ethics studies be used as a tool to unite Latinos as one group for one cause so our votes can actually have an impact on our local government and on a national scale?
Oh, that's a very important question. And I do believe that that ethnic studies will actually unite us because even as we're talking here right now, we have different perspectives. Different countries have suffered in many different ways. But I think that we become enlightened, and that's when we do become united. And then we understand not only the issues of, say, from us who are descendants of Mexico, but also the people that are descendants from other places like Peru and Bolivia and the Central American countries. So I think we do get united. And yes, the Latino vote is going to determine the elections. One of Dr. Martin Luther King's right hands, he was named Walter Fauntleroy, and he said that we can be the deciders. The Latino vote, and then we add the Black vote, and then we add the women's vote. And when I'm talking about the women's vote, I'm talking about the feminist vote, because we know that not all women are enlightened. Just like we have some Latinos that are not enlightened either. But, you know, but we put those 3 votes together, we can actually determine who is going to be not only our president, but our congresspersons that represent us. But the thing is with us, the Latinos, and I'm gonna ask all of you to please help us, okay? Please help us and get your friends and your family and your relatives and everybody to help on the elections. Now, they have to register to vote, and we're gonna be able to vote by mail in California, thanks to our Governor Gavin Newsom and our Secretary of State Alex Padilla, who is a descendant also of Mexico. But we're going to be able to vote, but we have to really tell people, inform them, and tell them where to look for the information. And we have the power, we really have the power in our Latino community. And in many cases, in many places like Salinas, where you're from, and the Latino vote will determine who is going to be the assemblyman and the congressman. So we can make it happen, but we just have to go out there and do the work. And the other thing I want to say this, and I don't know if you will agree with me or not, but I think a lot of times with our Latino families, they get the ballot and they have a lot of names on it and they have a lot of propositions on there and they're not sure how to vote. So no quieren quedar mal. They don't want to make a mistake, so they don't vote. And we have to say to them, no, vote for what you know. And if you don't know somebody on the ballot or you're not sure about them, leave it blank. But it's important to vote for your president, for your congressman, for your school board members, and ask for the information. That's another thing, una falla de que tenemos. One of the things that we lack in is that sometimes we don't want to ask for help because we think we're embarrassed or it's awkward for us to ask people to help us. But don't tell everybody. If you need help, ask somebody to help you. Somebody out there will help you. And if the first person that you ask doesn't, then ask the next person. And if that person doesn't, ask the next person. Somebody will be out there that will help you in whatever, in school, in voting. If you need something for your family, don't be reluctant or embarrassed to ask for help, okay? That somebody out there will help you.
Thank you, Dolores, and thank you, Nathan, for your question. And I think really it encompasses the importance and power that our students have, and knowing that they too can empower their communities to, see a difference. And so next, the next student I have is Stephanie.
Once again, thank you so much for being here. I actually have two questions. My first question is, when did you find out your voice had power? And my second question is, what keeps or kept you motivated, especially during the beginning of your social justice work?
My first time that I found out, this is kind of a quick little story. I'll try to make it short. When I first started organizing, there was a great man named Fred Ross Sr. If you guys want to look him up, it's Fred, like Federico Fred Ross, R-O-S-S Sr. And he wrote a book called The Social Arsonist. They wrote a book about him. Anyway, we're starting to organize, and a man came into our office, a farm worker. He had suffered a stroke, and he was on crutches, and he needed help for his family. So I went down to take him to the welfare department to make an application for help, for assistance. And they wouldn't let us make an application. And I didn't know what to do. So I went back to the office, and Mr. Fred Ross was there. He's the one that trained Cesar and myself and many others how to organize. And I said, Mr. Ross, they won't let us make an application. And he said to me, you go down to that office and you demand to see a supervisor. Now, he didn't say, I'm going to go with you. He didn't say, I'm going to phone them ahead of time or give them a note. He said, you go down there and you demand to see a supervisor. And I thought, wow, can I do that? And I did. And I went down there and I demanded to see the supervisor, and they insisted that they let this man make an application for help for his family. And then I found out that they were denying all of the Latino people the right to make an application. And anyway, I found my voice. And so I think that's the main thing, is that, when we feel that we have to go out there and make demands, and it's a little scary, we have those butterflies, but then we kind of pretend that we're going to go do this, and then we do it, and that's how we find our voice. Conquering the fear, conquering the apathy, and that is the main thing that holds us back, is a lot of people don't realize that they can get out there. I'm sure that all of you that are on this webinar right now, that you have already found your voice, but a lot of your friends have not yet, that they hold themselves back, especially the women, okay? Yeah, we hold ourselves back. So the main thing is to conquer the fear, to know that you have the power to make a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And so next I have Olivia. Olivia?
Hello, I'd like to ask you, how can those who are not able to vote yet have an impact and create the changes that we want to see? Specifically, what can we do to help the Ethnic Studies bill pass?
Oh, thank you for that. Okay, right now I think that Assemblyman Medina just told us we've got to write letters to Mr. Torrentino. He is a person that's in charge, I believe, of the, this is a committee that they send bills that they want to kill. So we want to make sure that we target him, and we target your own assemblyman, whoever it is, or your own senator, and ask them to please help. Remember, I talked about asking for help. Find out who your assemblyman and who your senator is, and get your friends and yourselves to send them emails and say, please pass the Ethnic Studies bill. It is so important for me, my friends, for my community. So we just need to put a lot of pressure on them. And this is the way that we pass legislation. We just get a lot. If they get like 30 emails or 40 emails and get all of your friends to do this, you know, then, and get your own local assemblyman to help you also. And then to this Mr. Torrentino, especially address an email to him and tell him that we need this bill for every single one of our Latino children. And not only our Latinos, all of our children of color need to have this bill passed because we want to end the racism. And by the way, I think he's Italian. And in my letter to him that I sent, I said to him that, you know, this is not only about Latinos, it's also about Italians, because when Italians came, especially to New York, they were very discriminated. Did any of you ever hear the word WAP? That's what we used to call Italians, you know. It was a discriminatory term for Italians. And I never knew what the word meant. Guess what it meant? Without papers. Without papers. That's what the word WAP meant. But all of you, also the people right now, que no tienen papeles, the people that right now are they're not old enough to vote, or they're undocumented, you know what? They can still get other people to vote. They can help make phone calls. And right now, especially phone calls, because right now with our virtual world that we have, it's going to be really more difficult to get people to vote. But they can help make phone calls to their friends, their neighbors, their relatives, everybody that they know. And while I'm on that point, I also want to say please help us also get people to participate in the census. We still have about 50% of our people, including undocumented, that have not participated in the census. And you know what's going to happen? If we don't get counted on the census, for every one of us that does not get counted, we lose $2,500, $2,500 for each one of us that does not get counted. We're going to lose that money. And because every year our government puts out $1.5 trillion, $1 trillion every single year. And the way they know where that money is going to go to is by how many people live in a community, in a neighborhood. And if we're invisible, if we're not counted, that money will not come. And what is that money used for? For schools, for clinics, for parks, for streets, for the things that we need. So please, when you get back home, or if you're home right now, and tell your relatives and your family, please fill the census, okay? They've extended it actually till August, the end of August. So now we have to be counted. So please beg them. And if they're undocumented, it's confidential. The information cannot be given to ICE. It cannot be given to anybody. It's anybody that violates the confidentiality of the competence of the census, they can go to prison for 5 years. And we actually went to court and we sued Donald Trump, our president, because he wanted to put a citizenship question on the census, and we won. And there is no citizenship question on the census. There's only about 9 questions. It takes about 10 minutes. All they want to know is how many people are in your household, their names and their birth dates, not where they're from, whether they're citizens. That is not being asked on the census. So we want to beg all of you to please help us. And you know, I have a lemma about that. I have a saying, and my saying is, si no nos contamos, nos fregamos, okay? You can translate that any way you want. Si no nos contamos, nos fregamos.
Thank you, Dolores, for that. Next up, we have Hema. Hema?
Yes, hello. Thank you again for all you're saying. I truly appreciate your insight as a student organizer myself. My question really connects to what Vida was really talking about when it comes to erasure. We know that the Latino diaspora is very huge and complicated, and we often see that some people's stories are often told more often than others. And so one of those communities is Afro-Latinx communities and indigenous communities that are not from Aztlán, like those of Oaxaca and Guerrero that are often erased and oppressed by the state government of their own countries. And so how do you see the different legislators and California Department of really engaging with these communities to really make sure that their stories are told? And often another part of the question is that ethnic studies sometimes, or like histories, often focuses on the negative. How do we really focus on the positive and the beauty of our communities when having ethnic studies to empower as a form of beautification of our stories?
Well, I think that to focus on the positive is very, very important. And when we talk about places like Oaxaca, And I don't know if any of you know this or not, this may be something that we need to have included in the ethnic studies curriculum, is that the Mexican food is one of the wonders of the world, like the Taj Mahal, you know, and the big wall in China. The Mexican food is one of the wonders of the world. And most of that comes because of the food in Oaxaca, and because all of the different types of moles, et cetera, the different kinds of food that people have there. And so there's a lot of things that we don't even know about our own culture. And I think that we have to celebrate, like you might say, we have to celebrate all of the great things that will come out of our different indigenous cultures and talk about them. And that's the only way that it's going to get out there, is that we have to insist that they are also spotlighted. And not only just Mexico, but all of these different areas. Like I know that even I have a son-in-law who goes to Oaxaca several times a year, and that you have all of these different languages that sound, when you hear people speaking their languages, it sounds like birds, it sounds like music. And these languages also are not celebrated. So I think that's up to us to be able to make that happen. Whatever we know about any different culture, that we should bring it to the front and put the spotlight on it so that people can know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hema.
And I think that Afro-Latino is also very important. Again, I just want to repeat what I said earlier about all of us go back to Africa in the first place. All of the music that we have, except for maybe the flutes and the kind of music that you hear from Peru, or the really indigenous music, but all of what we call Latin music, the cumbia, the salsa, the rumba, all of that goes back to Africa. That was brought to Latin America by the African slaves, and and I love Carlos Santana. Many of you know Carlos Santana because he is one of the few musicians that really gives credit to Africa for the Latino music that we enjoy and that we love. And it's unfortunate that the American music, United States music, that they do not give credit to Africa, because a lot of what we call the swing and jazz and all of that type of music, rock and roll, all of that also goes back to Africa also. So even the music has been colonized.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lois. And thank you, Hema, for your question. And I think you're accurate when you say, you know, acknowledging the beauty of our culture and owning that and challenging those narratives that we hear all too often that diminish our culture's beauty. So thank you for calling that out. Next, I have Rosa. Rosa?
Hello, I just want to say thank you for your time. I am from the Coachella Valley. I am from Desert Maryland High School, and I am part of the Puente Project. So we already have the ethnic studies courses cohorted into our English classes. So we've been exposed to literature by authors of color like Sandra Cisneros and so many other authors. And I just want to say that my experience with the ethnic studies courses has been like amazing, because we're exposed to so many different cultures and we're exposed to appreciate those cultures. And we learn about educational and transgenerational problems that have been going on for such a long time. And I just want to say that we should really value these ethnic studies courses, because I guess we learn to have a connection to what we're taught, right? So we're motivated to go to school. And I guess that ethnic studies really helped me in one of my darkest times. And so we learn to comprehend the system, and it really helps form our identity and help understand our classmates and respect others. So I wanted to ask you, how do we combat racism within our communities? Like, how do we combat racism from like towards like Asian Americans, or to like Purépechas, or to so many other minorities?
Well, first of all, I think we have to start with ourselves. And I think I did mention that whole issue about celebrating darkness instead of whiteness, about celebrating our indigenous culture. And I think many of us, even our own families, what you will be learning in ethnic studies, your own families don't even know that history. And so that you will have to be sharing that history with them to instill with them the pride and make them understand where the racism comes from, that it comes from the conquest, that it comes from domination, that it comes from slavery. And once they understand that, then they can start taking pride in their own looks and their own beauty. And we have to kind of start there. And I know a lot of us, like when my family, you know, my mother's side of the family, they all came from Spain and they came from France. And according to my DNA, even back to the United Kingdom. On my father's side, they came from, originally from Peru through Central America to Mexico. So I think I'm what they call us what the mestizos, because we are mixed, you know, and so many of us are like that. But knowing, but then when we think of our families and we think, well, most of them have been laborers, like farm workers or people that work as janitors or even in construction. And so none of us really know our history. So the ethnic studies that we learn, we have to share with our families, because often they don't know, because those histories were destroyed by the conquest. So we have to teach them what we know to instill that pride in our own families about our own history. But then, yeah, I think we also have to talk and teach them about the slavery against Black people and how they continue to suffer to this day, as we know. But now I'm so happy, and I know all of you are too, that it is now being challenged. And we know that racism also leads to the resources, that resources are not given to brown communities or Black communities, and that the poverty goes on generation after generation after generation. And so these are the challenges that we have. And people are saying we need to have radical change, okay? Not just, you know, ethnic studies is going to be really important, but we need to make sure that it's broadened. And then we have to look at our economic systems. And I want to mention this, and I hope some of you, and I don't know if anybody on our team here today has been to Cuba. And I know that there's people that have a lot of issues about Cuba and Fidel Castro, but I have been to Cuba about 5 times. And you know what they have in Cuba? They have free healthcare. They have free education for everybody. And these are the things that we actually have to strive for also in our country, to get rid of the economic inequalities that exist in our country. And so these are the challenges that we have. We are the richest country in the world. Cuba is one of the poorest countries in the world. So if they can have free college for everyone, if they can have free healthcare for everyone, why cannot the richest country in the world, the United States of America, do the same? So these are the things that we have to think about in the future, and the things that we have to fight for. And you are the ones that are going to be doing the fighting. So anyway, I wish you luck. And I know that ethnic studies will embolden you and make you stronger to be able to carry on these fights in the future.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you, Dolores. So next up we have Adriana. Adriana, did you have any questions? Great.
Yeah, hi. Hello, Ms. Dolores Huerta. So I'm also from the Puente project in Desert Mirage High School. And with these ethnic classes, as Rosa said, it's just like, it's really enhanced my self-worth that I've seen like throughout the years. Like looking back to my freshman year, I always felt like unworthy of certain things, and just like I was always wrong in my like situations. But like with now looking back, I'm gonna be an incoming senior, and it's just I've really changed like the outlook that I had within myself. And one question that I had was, I'm from the Coachella Valley, and it's in the eastern part. It's a farm working community, and I just wanted to ask if you had like any strategies or anything that you would recommend on how to like how to connect communities right now and during this pandemic, and like how to fight for inequalities and things on education and infrastructure that you did in your time, and like how would you recommend for us to do the same during this pandemic, and how to reach the older generation that might not be like as tech savvy or that might not know English so well and things like that?
Well, I think you're lucky that in Coachella and in Indio, you actually have some really good leadership down there. There's a woman named Amalia de Atzlan, who was active in the farm worker struggle when she was only 16 years old, and all of her family. And so they have some, they fought very hard there to get a farm worker clinic in that area many years ago that is still alive today. And so you do have some good Latino leadership in that area. And the congressman actually from that area is a doctor. Dr. Reese, who has, I think, like, he's also an MD, but he also has a couple of other doctorates. So you have some really good organizations down there. So I would definitely try to connect with them. and try to organize some of your friends to participate in that, especially now that we're coming up for the elections. I know that also that area right now has been hit very hard with the COVID-19 virus, but there are a lot of groups out there that you can actually connect with and, get some of your friends to also engage in. And you will have a lot of work to do between now and the elections. And also, by the way, I think the census area down there is one of the areas that people are not really participating. So if you can help in that way. And I just want to say to all of you, what I call organizing 101 is getting involved in elections, okay? Get involved with the candidate that you like and go out there. And no, we can't go door to door right now. Hopefully between now and October, the pandemic will have leveled so that the COVID, the virus will have leveled so we can actually do some door to door. But if you can't, in the meantime, start doing some virtual organizing on your telephones or on your computers with Zooming and talk to your friends about getting involved, even if they're not old enough to vote right now. If one person, each one of us can probably get about 40 other people to vote. And then also if you have relatives in other states, right now we're working on what they call the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act is going to be voted on in the US Senate. And here in California, we have two really good senators, Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. But in the other states like Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, if you have relatives in those other states, call them and ask them, could you please email your senator to tell them vote yes on the HEROES Act, okay? It's going to be coming up for a vote, I think about the 20th of July, around there. And we need to peel off about 4 senators to make that pass. And I know a lot of you know farm workers in your communities, like in the Coachella Valley, but the thing is that the HEROES Act is going to have some what they call hazard pay. Farm workers have been working out there every single day to feed people. And many of them, as you know, have become ill from the COVID-19. So the HEROES Act will have some additional help for all of our families in the United States that have been impacted by the pandemic. So do that work and get out there and, or if we can't get out in the streets, hopefully we can by September or October, on the telephones and on your computers, get all of your friends to commit that they're going to help on the elections, and then maybe each one of them can get 5 other people and get them to get 5 other people so we can spread the word and get everybody involved. This is Organizing 101.
Thank you, Dolores, and thank you, Adriana. We have Lourdes up next. Lourdes?
I'm a JFE graduate and a future freshman for Cal State San Bernardino. And my question for you, Ms. Huerta, is over all the challenges and struggles you faced, what prospered in not giving up?
Well, we can't give up because the only time, and I'm going to quote Cesar Chavez on this one, Cesar would always say, the only time that you lose is when you give up, okay? And so we know that we can't give up in all of these issues that we're talking about. And I can look back because I am quite old, as you all know. I'm 90 years old, by the way. And if you missed my birthday party, by the way, you can still see it. It's on Netflix or YouTube. Si se puede, Dolores Huerta, 90th birthday. Anyway, but and I look back and I remember when I went to college, there was only a handful of us that went to college. Of Latinos and African American, my friends. Most of them were either pushed out of school or they were so disillusioned with education that they dropped out. And so, that is definitely going to change. And now we can see that many colleges, we have 40%, 50% people of color, but we still have a long way to go. UCLA, which is like the biggest educational institution that we might have at the university level, the number of African-American students and Latino students is still infinitesimal. It's very, very small, and that cannot continue. And there's other state colleges like San Luis Obispo, where again, African-American students are only like 3 or 4% of the student body. Latinos are about 6%. And so that cannot continue. We've got to open that up. And there is going to be a proposition on the ballot called, it's going to be ACA 5. I'm not sure what the proposition number, but it's to bring back affirmative action. And affirmative action, we had that here in California. Republican Governor Pete Wilson got rid of it, and they put it on the ballot, but they misled people by calling it a civil rights issue. And anyway, it was taken out. And it was very simple. Colleges and public institutions have to have, they have to admit numbers of minorities and women to their institutions, to colleges, and also contracts that the government gives out, government contracts to people of color and to women. And it was taken away from us, but now we're going to get it back. So that's one of the propositions that it's going to be on the ballot, and affirmative action to bring that back to California. And then the other one that we have to vote on is schools and communities first. And this is going to be very important. And we have a number on that one, Proposition 15, okay? Proposition 15. And that one, we have to get everybody to vote on that proposition, because that will bring in $12 billion into our schools. And in California, I think we're like number 36 in the nation about the amount of money that we give to each student for schools. And before we used to be number 1 or 2 in California. Now we are number 36. So we've got to bring in this money, and we say, where's the money going to come from? It's going to come from these big property owners like Disneyland and Chevron to pay their fair share of property taxes, okay? Fair share of property taxes to bring in the money that we need for our educational system. And this does not affect small businesses. Anybody that makes any small business that makes under 3 million is not affected by this law. Anybody who owns a home, their property taxes are not going to go up. Only the big major corporations. So we're going to need your help on that, because the big real estate people, they're going to come after us, and they're going to lie. They're going to say that homeowners, their property taxes are going to go up, and we have to say, no, that's not true. That small businesses are going to have to pay more in property taxes. We say, no, that's not true. It only affects the big, like the big petroleum companies and some of these big, major corporations that haven't paid their fair share of property taxes for decades. Now they're going to have to start doing that. So, and there's going to be another one about rent control also. So we have to really understand how important all of these ballot measures are, because they affect our families. And so we need your help in all of that. So this is part of being woke, okay? We got to stay woke, and we got to make sure that we engage, especially in the electoral process, which is coming right around the corner, you know, in November the 2nd. So not too far from now.
Thank you for making sure we stay woke, Dolores, and I'm glad to hear that from you. You are 90 years old and you are fire. You are just, you know, so full of energy and courageousness, and so thank you for your tenacity. We have about 15 minutes left, and so we still have 3 more students that have questions, and then our state superintendent is going to close us out. But man, I am just impressed with how much energy and fire you bring to this conversation. Your passion shines through the screen right now, so thank you. Next we have Abril. Abril, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to ask her, like, oh wait, sorry, let me introduce myself. Okay, I'm Abril Montellano, and I go to Desert Mirage, and I'm an incoming junior, and I started the Puente project. I mean the Puente project, and we were like the 4th class, so there was a lot of students, and which is really growing, and it's helping us really learn about our like history and empower us more. And I wasn't born here, but I relate to like all the people that are like Mexican American, because I was raised here my whole life. And it's just like that, not learning about our history for so long, it just makes you feel like, yeah, you don't matter. But when I joined this like program, I like sorry, I'm very nervous. When I joined this program, it just felt like very empowering, and knowing that you could do a lot to help others is something that I aspire to do. And we learned about you and Cesar Chavez this year and my freshman year, and I really look up to you because you were you didn't take, like, you weren't afraid to speak up. And as a woman at that time, I feel like that was something that really helped other women to like speak up about the problems in our community. And yeah, I really admire you for that. So thank you. And the question I have is that how do we teach our older generation here to support what's going on right now in the world, like the Black Lives Matter movement? Because I've seen that a lot of our like older people just stay quiet or don't think that they should support it. And I feel like we should, because we're all hand in hand, that we're all being oppressed in this country. And I've learned about the Black and brown unity in the past, and I really wish to see that now from the older people in our like Latino community and Chicano community here, that we should really help each other out, fight this like racism and everything in our country. And I would like to know how to approach them to help out. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a great question that you have. Unfortunately, we have a lot of our traditions that come from the church, from the Catholic Church. You know, the whole idea of always dividing people, and that of course comes from the people that are in power, and they do try to divide us. Like they will say to the African American community, you know, these people are coming and taking jobs that you should have. And they like to keep us divided. So we do have to do a lot of work with our families and explain to them. And one of the things that in order, like I said before, I think our immigrant communities, they know about Dr. Martin Luther King, but they really don't know about slavery. And they don't know about what happened in the South. They don't know about Reconstruction, when people, Black people were finally freed as slaves, but then they started the Jim Crow and the lynching and all of that suppression that exists to this day. And so we have to kind of teach our families about that, because they don't know about that. We have to teach our families about women's reproductive rights. We have a lot of our Latino families that vote the wrong way because on the issue of abortion. And so, you know, we have to teach them that women have a right to their own bodies, and that nobody should tell them exactly how many children they want to have, because a lot of our families are very traditional, they're very Catholic, and you know, they think abortion is a sin. And so we have to say to them, no, and I like to quote, and also about the gay issue. A lot of our families are still hung up on, and they don't realize that people that are gays or lesbians, that they have that right to love whomever they want, and that it's not a quote unquote sin, or it's not unnatural. So I like to always, and you can borrow this, and please do, say to our Latino families, when it talks about homophobia or reproductive rights, lo que dijo Benito Juárez, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respecting other people's rights is peace, in terms of how many children a woman wants to have or not have, or also about who somebody wants to marry or fall in love with. It is their human right to make that decision about their own bodies. And then we have to really tell our families about the story of Emmett Till, this young teenager who was killed in Mississippi because he whistled, supposedly, now they're not even sure that even happened, at a white woman, and they bludgeoned his body and murdered him. And he was from Chicago, and there's pictures of Emmett Till that people can see. That his mother was such a strong, courageous woman that she had an open casket for her son. And over 50,000 people saw that body. And that was what they say the beginning of the civil rights movement. But a lot of our Latino families, because they're immigrants, they're just trying to survive, and they don't know the stories of the civil rights movement and even the women's rights movement trying to get the right to vote. So we have to tell them those stories so they will know. So in a way, I said before that you have to become missionaries of justice, but you also have to become educators. And sometimes we have to start with our own families.
Thank you. And so we have a few minutes left. Esmeralda will be the last question, and then the state superintendent will be closing out. Thank you. Esmeralda, I think you're muted. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Esmeralda Leal, and I am an incoming senior in Desert Mirage, which is in Eastern Coachella Valley. Like my peers, Adriana and Rosa had said before, my high school already has ethnic studies through the Puente program. And like they said too, it has created a foundation to my identity and understanding of my ancestors, and overall, like everything that's going on right now, it has created a foundation of understanding for me. And I think they are really helpful. They are really it personally has helped me build my identity. And not only does it teach us about Chicanos and Latinos, but it is also, like in my sophomore multicultural class, it taught us about Native Americans, African Americans, and it teaches us about a lot of backgrounds. And well, my question to you, Dolores Huerta, is how do we learn to uncondition ourselves to think that the lighter skin is more superior to the darker skin? And how do we learn to accept people, like racist people, that have unfortunately fallen in that idea that they are superior to us?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little earlier, but I think we just have to have a lot of patience, and we have to tell them stories about the barbaric actions that the different conquistadores have done, whether they were the people that came from Europe or the people that, from different parts of Europe, and how this still continues to this day. I mean, we could say that it's over, but no, it's ongoing, and we see this still happening. So I think we just have to give them examples, and we have to tell them stories. The one great thing about stories is, and one of the stories I like to share with people is about, a lot of people, thought we have all the statues of Christopher Columbus, but what people didn't know is that Columbus actually, they actually led hunting parties where they would go out and shoot the indigenous people like they were animals. They would go out on hunting parties to kill the Taino Indians, and the Arawak Indians. They would go out there and actually go out there and hunt them. And the same thing, of course, happened with Native Americans here in the United States. They had a saying, the only good Indian is a dead Indian, and so I think we have to tell them these kind of stories and try to reach their hearts. And sometimes when we can't reach them right away, like I said before, we just have to have patience with them. But the other thing too is and now that we're ending this conversation, is sometimes you have to do it through laws and through power. And as we get the type of, when I talk about power, I'm talking about the power that we need to change laws. When people feel empowered, then they will not tolerate, or the discrimination will not affect them, because they can see where it's coming from, and they could see the ignorance of the origin of that ignorance in people. And so, Dr. Martin Luther King said, racism is an illness. It's an illness. And so people that are racist are sick. And if we can look at ourselves as being the healers, okay, because we are bringing light. Les estamos prendiendo el coco, because están tapados, we might say in Spanish, that so we are trying to enlighten them and bring this knowledge and erase the ignorance that they have. That it actually not only colors the way they think, but it also taints the way that they act. And so we have to think of ourselves as healers, and whether that is with our families, but also with the outside world. And we know that to do this, that we have to be strong ourselves, and we have to be, we have to have the energy not to get tired. But then we also have to, refurbish ourselves, re-energize ourselves, so that we can keep the struggle going. As I said before, I'm 90 years old. And people ask me, well, why don't you retire? Enough already. But then I think this, if I can enlighten some other group, whether to let them know that they have power and that they can change their conditions, or whether we can enlighten other people to erase the racism from their minds. You know, if we can then empower ourselves, I think that is the most important thing. And if there's one other person out there, one other community, like we do with the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we organize people in their homes, like I said before, and teach them how they can get power. And with power, you can change things. And this is what I want to keep doing. And I know that of all of you that are listening here, that we're working together here, that you are also going to be able to do this. And the other thing I want to say to you, run for an office in your school, okay? Because then you get the, and even if you lose, but you, that way you learn how to organize politically. And that way you can also run in your communities where you're at. Run for city council, you know, once you're 18 years old. We have our mayor of Arbor, California, Jose Gurola. He was only 19 when he was elected as mayor, okay? And they have had a couple of attempts to try to get rid of them, but guess what, he's still there. One other thing I just want to end with, well, two things. When I was introduced, they called me iconic, okay? And my youngest son, Ricardo Chavez, he used to do hip hop before, but he said, Mom, you are not an icon, you're an I-can, okay? You're an I-can, and that's what all of us are. We're I-cans. Podemos hacer las cosas. We can move things, we can do things. And so think of all of ourselves as being an I-can. And the other thing I want to say to end, I'm going to ask you all a question, and I want you to give me the answer. And the question is a very simple one. I'm going to ask you, who's got the power? And I want you to say, we've got the power. And when I say, what kind of power? I want you to say, people power. Okay, can we do that? Can we do that? Okay, let's, yes. Okay, let's do it. Okay, who's got the power?
We got the power.
We got the power.
We got the power.
What kind of power?
People power.
People power.
Yeah, and the biggest power that we have is in education. And I want to thank our superintendent of schools, Tony Thurman. I want to thank Jose Medina. I want to thank all of you because education is power. Education is power because it gives us the kind of knowledge and the confidence and the pride that we need. And so I want to thank you very much for having me be part of your webinar. I'm very, very grateful to all of you. And I hope we'll see each other in person once the pandemic is over.
Thank you. Mil gracias, Dolores Huertas. Gracias, muchísimas gracias. Y quiero darte el gracias para decir que estás apoyando a los estudiantes en todo el estado ahorita.
No se
has cambiado vidas.
Thank you.
Y,
no les olvides, si se puede. All right? Yes, we can. Si se puede.
Sí se puede. Superintendent?
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, students. And thank you, Subcommittee Medina. And thank you, Dolores Huerta. You just closed with Si se puede. And many of us did not know that it was in fact you who created the phrase Si se puede. And that this phrase has become kind of a rallying cry for organizing all around the world, including the rallying cry for organizing of a former organizer who ultimately became president, none other than Barack Hussein Obama. How did you come to create the phrase Si se puede for our organizing work?
Well, actually it happened in Arizona in 1972. Cesar Chavez had just completed, or he was in the middle of a water-only fast. And we were trying to organize some of the professional Chicanos, Mexican-Americans in Arizona to come and support us. And I was having a meeting with them and they told me, oh, you can't do that here in Arizona, only in California. And my response to them was, Si se puede in Arizona. Yes, we can in Arizona. And so that kind of became our rallying cry for that campaign that we did. And you know, because they had passed a law that farm workers could be put in prison for 6 months if they went on strike. that anybody who said boycott anything could also be put in prison. So they did pass the law, but it was eventually overturned. And what Cesar Chavez did after that fast that he did, that 25-day water-only fast, he stayed in Arizona and he registered voters. He led a voter registration campaign starting at the border in San Luis, Arizona, all the way to Flagstaff, to the northern part of Arizona. And they elected the first African-American woman to the state legislature, the first Latino senator, and the first Navajo woman to the state legislature in Arizona after that drive. And and the first Latino governor of the state of Arizona.
Thank you for that. It's interesting that you reference Arizona because we know that as it relates to ethnic studies, you have been a champion for ethnic studies and that you campaigned to help bring ethnic studies to the state of Arizona and to work against bans that have been put in place against teaching ethnic studies in Arizona. I also know that you were recognized as UCLA celebrated the 50-year anniversary of the introduction of Chicano Latino studies, and that you were recognized and that you've been a part of the movement for ethnic studies and Chicano Latino studies really from its founding. We are so grateful for you. You've shared so much and been so generous. Given your historical view on the importance of Chicano Latino studies and ethnic studies as an organizer and as an advocate, is there anything else that you wish to share now as we are moving to create the opportunity for ethnic studies to be available for all of our students in California?
Well, I do believe, as I have shared earlier, that this is the basis of really saving the soul of our country. Because if we could start teaching everyone, every single person, what the contributions are of people of color to our country, I should say, to the United States of America and to our world, I think it is going to make all of the difference because of what we are seeing right now, what has become of the United States of America, this country with so much racism in it that is hurting so many people. And we didn't even talk about the incarceration of Black and brown people, especially young people in our country. The lack of resources that we need in our communities, the generational poverty that we have. We know that this will be maybe the beginning of when people understand that this is something that is untenable, that we cannot continue to have racism in our society because it hurts everyone, not only people of color who suffer the most, but it really hurts our whole society, our whole country when we have racism that exists. And this is the one very important weapon to end racism is through ethnic studies.
Dolores Huerta, thank you. Students, I hope you appreciate how special this time is to be with Dolores Huerta. She obviously needs no introduction. She is incredible in her advocacy, having been there at the start of the movement for Chicano Latino studies and ethnic studies. I'm grateful to her personally. She's been a mentor to me from the first time we met, that I expressed a desire to serve the community. Dolores Huerta, you said yes. And I love that you said that we are people who can, and that we must continue to say that. Dolores, I want to make we have something for you, and Cindy's going to describe it to you. Because of what you've done to lift up the importance of Chicano Latino studies, we're going to make an offer available to the first 100 students who reach out to us. We're going to provide them with some reading material at no cost to them on the importance of Chicano Latino studies. And to each of our students who participated today, they will be able to have, at no cost to them, something to read of their choice. And we will help them identify different materials on the importance of Chicano Latino studies. We're in an important movement. Our nation is trying to heal from hurt, from racism, from police brutality, from anti-Semitism, from hurts of all kinds. And the ethnic studies movement, as much as it has been an effort to get it formalized since the 1960s, we are at the cusp of creating an ethnic studies curriculum that recognizes the importance of Chicano Latino contributions to California and to our nation, of African Americans, of Asian Pacific Islanders and Native Americans in California. And we're so grateful for you. And because of you, we will be making this gift to the first 100 students who reach out to us. I'm going to ask the CDE team to give us an email address that we can put out for our students to express their interest in receiving reading materials at no cost to them on the importance of Chicano Latino studies, and that each one of our participants today will be given some reading materials of their choice. And so, Cindy, I'm going to allow you to share the gift that we have for Dolores Huerta. Gracias for all that you share, and I'm grateful for you, and hope you'll continue to stay with us as we continue this webinar series.
Well, thank you very much for your leadership, Secretary Thurman. It's so important that we have you there fighting for our students and fighting for public education, which I know is like the basis. And you know, I like to say Franklin Delano Roosevelt said that education was the soul of our country. We have seen that. And with ethnic studies, we're going to really strengthen the soul and give us the kind of the courage that we need to go forward and end the racism and discrimination that we have in our society. Thank you very much. And also Assemblyman Jose Medina, thank you.
Thank you, Dolores and State Superintendent. We definitely have a gift, a certificate of appreciation, as well as a rebozo that we will be sending you as a token of our appreciation. You are our treasure to our community, and understanding that you have influenced so many generations, and will continue to do that and plant seeds as we go forward with our work in ethnic studies and understanding the transformative aspects that it can do to so many families. So thank you. Thank you to the students and their courage in sharing their stories. Understanding that the conversation around ethnic studies continues. We will be continuing a webinar series about the importance with other prominent figures in each field, and understanding how their voices contribute to the American story, and how we can really change lives. And so the email that I'm going to share out is essentially, it's the SPI forums at cde.ca.gov for the students to reach out for material. Thank you again. And our next session is Tuesday, July 21st on Asian American Studies. So please stay tuned. Thank you. And as you said, si se puede. Yes, we can, and we will continue. So gracias.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.